Welcome, AES. We're going to be today talking about the new performance space at Harlem School of the Arts in New York. Actually, not so new. We're doing this on the afternoon of September 22nd in the fall. Beautiful New England, beautiful fall day here in the Northeast. But as you'll quickly see, we've got people from all over the world here. Most of the folks here don't need any introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway on our Zoom meeting. And I'm going to, yep, we're in gallery view, so that's pretty good. All right. Eric Pryor, waving, is the Executive Director, President of Harlem School of the Arts. I'm just going over in the squares as I see them, and as probably everybody will see them. I'm John Storick. Most of you know who I am. And Josh is COO and was project manager on this build. PK Pandy represents the installation team. Okay, Federico Padron was lead systems designer. Normally is in Argentina, although ironically is in New York this week on holiday. Celia Imre, normally in New York, but today is in Paris. From Imre Studio, was the lead architectural design for the entire project. There were other pieces of this project that was just maybe mentioned in passing, but we're going to focus on the performance hall. And Herb Albert is needs no introduction, and without Herb, we wouldn't even be here today. We'll learn a little bit more about that. And he is, the sun is dragging with him because he's on the West Coast, and continues to root for the Dodgers to be in the playoffs. Okay. And behind him is one of Herb's paintings. Fantastic. So that's the team. Today's panel. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I would like to start by sharing my screen, and I want to roll a little video of a performance that happened not that long ago in this space, without telling anybody about the space, because I think it sets the stage for what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to.
For this Juneteenth celebration, we began with Starburst by Jesse Montgomery. Here are the Harlem Chamber Players from the Harlem School of the Arts.
Okay. I think that says it all. Actually, we could just stop right there. Eric, thanks for sharing. I know you sent me that link, and I listened to it more than once.
Thank you.
Even through my computer speakers, it was very gratifying. I mean, just to see anything happen in the pandemic in that room. And I think for a while, that was the only living and breathing space at the school. So I thought that was just a nice way to set the tone. You're going to see more photos of this space and how we got to it, but how rewarding for all of us to see all of these efforts finally become a real project. So with that, I would like to ask Eric to maybe set the stage a little bit for the history of the Harlem School of the Arts and how we got to this moment in time.
Well, thank you, John, and thank you for sharing that video from the partnership with the Harlem Chamber Players who were in residence last year at HSA. When we look at our history at HSA, we were founded in 1964 by renowned opera singer Dorothy Maynor, and Ms. Maynor's vision was to really create a space, a safe space for Black and brown kids primarily, to be able to engage in the arts and to the arts to help set them on a path to really be able to, navigate America and navigate our society. And she felt the arts were the best way to teach them to be master communicators and master critical thinking, creative problem solving, and working collaboratively. Move forward 10 years or so ago, the school fell on hard times, and that's when the power of media stepped in. We didn't ask at that time, weren't trying to get a story in the New York Times, but a story did come out in the New York Times saying that the Harlem School of the Arts was closing. And we were fortunate that the gentleman on this video with us, Herb Alpert, read it in California and was moved by what he read and decided to step in and see how he could help. This was many years before this project. And since Herb stepped in and really fortified us and fortified the school and kept it going, and it transformed into, at that time, was renamed our whole facility, the Herb Alpert Center. But Herb didn't stop there. He didn't stop being involved there. He stayed involved in HSA. We met, and that's where this journey began. We have a beautiful space, but it's brutalist architecture done by Ulrich Franzen in the mid-'70s. And in the mid-'70s, New York City, it was created to be a safe haven. This really, imposing brick wall. No one knew what was behind it. It was this oasis behind it. And in one of Herb's visits, he would be in New York typically once a year before the pandemic. And I said to Herb, I shared the vision of having this visibility where people could see where we were from the outside. And I never will forget Herb. We were walking out the plaza, and he said, "Erica, let me know how I can help with that." And I never forgot that. And I met Celia Emery on a trip in Martha's Vineyard, and Celia was also moved by what we were doing here at HSA. And Celia basically indulged me and basically helped to create she created the initial vision for how we could transform the space. And
everybody should take a look at what this building looked like, because it doesn't look like that anymore.
And and I just say it's been this amazing journey. Celia gave us what we needed to take back to, and I took it back to the head of Herb's foundation and Rona Sebastian, and I shared with Rona me and Herb's conversation in the courtyard about him saying, "Hey, let me know I could help." And she shared what we had put together for Herb, and that was the beginning of what we now call the Renaissance Project, and which has positioned HSA in an amazing way.
Great. Well, thanks, Eric, for the brief history. We'll leave this photo up a few more minutes, and due to time restraints and also in a logical next progression, Celia, what was your initial, or still is your initial core idea for transforming the entire building, and in specific the entrance and the space? In case everybody doesn't know where we're going with this, behind this wall came down, and you're about to see what's going to take place in its instead. So Celia, can you help us right now?
Yeah, thank you, everyone. So I'm mostly a museum architect. My main kind of bread and butter and focus is that type of cultural work, and it has to do with people interacting in a space and looking at art and being with art and in art. And that's my main focus. And I've always been interested in just people and how architecture works in that to help people express themselves. And about 5 years ago, I kind of pivoted my practice and started doing a lot of pro bono work in nonprofits and helping nonprofits with their identity of who they are. Because in a museum, you ask, who are you, all the time? Every art object you want to ask, what is that object about? And so when I met Eric and he described his institution and that was connected to the arts, I was like, oh, wow, well, I think I might be able to say something here because it's connected already to someplace I'm already worked. I had worked in many nonprofits that had nothing to do with the arts. So I arrived there, and here's this incredible building inside. I mean, it is really a gem of what they call a party. The core organization, the bones of this building are so good. It's so great that Herb made that initial investment to save it because it really has a tremendous core. And I was like, let's just, and Eric described the issues around security, because when you have a building that is so opaque, there's a real issue with people being able to see the outside from inside and children getting dropped off and picked up. And so as you can see, you cannot see the street. And when a child leaves that building, no one on the inside can tell that they've left. But not only that, you're looking there at what was a stage and performance area. And so it was a lobby that doubled as a kind of performance space. They had a grand piano in that corner. And I was thinking, wow, well, wouldn't it be great for this institution to be able to share what it does, kind of the way Alvin Ailey does, and I've lived in Hell's Kitchen before. Oh, this is as you're going through these lovely slides, there's an extraordinary courtyard on the other side of this two-story space that was already in existence. The fountain was in disrepair. As you can see, the materials on the ground were kind of a mix of different materials. So part of our work ended up becoming an upgrade. But to tell the truth, the very beginning project was simply take off the brick face, take off the facade, and expose the contents. And it was
I'll
just
stay on this view for a second. This kind of shows it all.
it was just a curtain wall with this performance space behind. And from what I recall, Herb, you can agree or not agree, but basically you came in and said, we're going to help the Harlem School of the Arts. And so then when we rendered just the curtain wall and you looked at those images, you were like, wait a minute, we didn't take care of this incredibly important space right behind the curtain wall, because the beginning project was just to give this a coat of paint. And you stepped in and we're like, wait a minute, this is an opportunity we can't miss, which is to give the kids an opportunity to really let themselves be heard, let themselves perform and get inspired, because this is a lobby. It's what everybody sees when they walk in the door. And with all the stuff hanging now and kind of performance ready, it's truly inspiring. We're going to get to that slide soon.
And Celia, I want to add something to what you're saying, and Herb, you might remember this conversation. Herb, I forget, I can't remember if you had reached out to me or which way it happened, but Herb asked me, Eric, what are we doing in the space acoustically? And I never will forget, I said, there are going to be acoustic properties. And Herb immediately said, I'm going to call you back. And he reached out to John. Herb had the foresight of knowing, for those of you who don't know my background, I have an MFA and a BFA in painting. And he immediately understood that this opportunity to get the acoustics right in this space was pivotal to the project. And he just, whether you call it instinctually, knew that and asked the right question right off the top.
Well, it certainly sets the tone, and it certainly sets the stage for us focusing on this space. WSDG, I personally had met Herb relatively late in my life. We've become very good friends, actually. It's actually one of the really cool things that's happened. We did some work at UCLA on some rooms, and I was out in California sitting with Herb, and I wish I had a photo of this. And Herb literally showed me some of the early designs, the early sketches, and a lot, there had not been that much consideration, or not that there was non-consideration, it just had not been a primary focus, like Celia mentioned, as to making this space, I think, a potentially world-class performance space for its size, and certainly in Harlem. There's nothing really like this in Harlem. And most of the focus was on restructuring the entrance, which I think, because it was not particularly well organized, now it's very well organized. Getting rid of this silly stage in the corner, making it one level so there could be multiple seating arrangements, et cetera, and performing arrangements. And Herb said, well, wait, there's got to be something we can do. So we started to take a look at it. And I literally remember sitting on a radiator with her. We were running some tests at UCLA. Herb and I were out in the hall because it was very noisy. And I said, I don't know, maybe we got to angle the glass. And Herb had maybe like that Jazz at Lincoln Center project, which I'm not even sure if Herb realized we had worked on it. And I want to show you a picture of it. Let me share my screen. Everybody's kind of know the Allen room there at the smaller room at Jazz, where this angled glass, which is actually the inside glass of this room. There's a big curtain wall on the outside, Skidmore Owens building. But that angled glass is really 50% of the trick of that room. That's basically what makes the room work. Sound hits that glass, goes up into the ceiling, it's diffused and sprinkles down. And that's what gives, this is basically Wynton Marsalis's Jazz at Lincoln Center. This is his primary performance space. It's a completely acoustic space. There are speakers there that are used for other kinds of performances. But that's the trick. And Herb said, well, why don't we do something like that? And I said, well, I think that might be a good idea. And that was the core idea. I wish I could take credit for it, but I got to give it to Herb. And I wish I had a picture of us sitting on that radiator with I think it was actually a napkin, or it was a scrap of paper out of my pocket or something. Drew a little angle. I mean, relatively soon went back to Celia, and the straight piece of glass became angled, and all of a sudden acoustic properties started making sense. And I think that was really the birth of that room, going from an amazing transparent facade, bringing outside to inside, with organizing the entrance, et cetera, into the potential of it really becoming a transformative performance space. And as you'll see later on in this presentation, from that, we just kept going and going and developed acoustic solutions, electroacoustic solutions, and lighting solutions. But I don't know if I've ever officially thanked Herb for that, for pushing me a little bit, and in doing so, pushing everybody. Herb you have a magical ability to do that. I'm not sure. I don't know how you do it, but you do. You just get all of us to do a little bit better than we would normally do. So an official thanks. I don't know if you remember that day. I think you do.
I remember. I remember, Mom. Yeah, of course I remember that day. Sometimes I get a little bit more credit than I deserve, because I think one of my strong features is, surrounding myself with great talent. And you and Celia and the crew, I mean, you pulled it together. I jump in. I find it really hard to talk about the arts, John, to be quite frank with you. I just feel like it's a field. I think music is a field. I think art is a field. Dance and acting is a field. And a space, to create a space that has a feel that's the win. And that's what I was going for. For a few years now, I've played at a place in Pittsburgh called the Manchester Craftsman Guild, designed by, well, not designed by, but started by an incredible gentleman by the name of Bill Stripling. And I remember the first time I walked in there, and this place in Pittsburgh is in the rough part of town. I mean, it was.
Yeah, it's a cool place, actually. I know the place.
Yeah. So I walked in and, became enamored with what he had accomplished there. And each year it kept improving. And the beauty of that space is when kids walk in there, they feel, wow, they're welcomed into a space that they didn't expect to see. He has art objects and things that make it so user-friendly and so much fun to be in that space, that I always felt that that's a good part of a successful place. When I got involved with the Harlem Center, that's exactly what I was hoping to create in there. Some place where you feel comfortable, where you feel safe. That's about it. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, like I started with, my trick is to surround myself with real creative people, and that's what I did at A&M. At A&M, I always surrounded myself with people who could do things that I couldn't, or maybe didn't want to do, but I found the best. And with this project here, with John and Celia, and Eric and all the people involved. This is it's
Yeah.
so gratifying to know that we pulled it off in a space that's uniquely special. And the beauty of it for me is that this type of space, not exactly, but it could be duplicated. It could be, you could use this in any, as a template for doing it in any part of the country.
So Herb, you inspired me so much and you led me. And the way it happened was that my main focus had been visual art and the experience of the body and looking and being. And I hadn't done, I'd done a library before in schools, but I'd never done a theater. And what I learned through working with you was kind of like they did say the word whole child, you know, where the full experience of the child. I'll just speak to this image, Herb, for a second. So, you know, working with John was extraordinarily, and his team, and Josh and Federico was amazing, because they were like, just make a beautiful ceiling and we're going to make it work. And it was still challenging because I knew that the ceiling needed to perform in some very strong acoustical manner. And it needed to be ready to deploy. And so our first, you know, and I hadn't done a theater before, our first versions were kind of like a butterfly, very, very focused on the idea of movement. In this institution, you've got dance, you've got music, art, vocal, theater. There's so many different kinds of ways of, you want to have the sense of a child experimenting and never being afraid to go out to the end of a branch the way a squirrel might try the end of a branch and then come back if it doesn't work, or jump to the next branch. And so there's this idea of movement and testing and trying that became a kind of theme in the design. And yeah, we laid out many versions of different kinds of audiences, which at the original time could only be oriented toward the corner. And of course, this way you can see how the grand piano is on the north wall. It can be on the south wall. It can be in the middle. Josh and his team have set this up so that the performance can be in the round, in any direction. That's basically the core. If you go back, if you zoom back, you could see the overall context of the plan. If you wanted to show that, where I could just.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think it's
Yeah.
important to note that it became obvious very early on that this space could be a lot of things for a lot of different people before, and this is what we inherited. This was the existing, it had this sort of stage in the wrong place and a pit, and you couldn't really, you were trapped. You couldn't really do very much with the space. It was awkward. I mean, the creative talents of the students pushed it to the limit. But once the floor became flat, and once we figured out how to get the orientation and the electronics correct, we then realized we had 3 or 4 really different layouts. The orientation could be, why don't we just leave the plan on, Josh, or up plan? Yeah. This always was my favorite performance layout, kind of a traditional seating layout. Why? Because there's a balcony that runs across. I'll even annotate. Actually, I can't annotate, but you can. There's a balcony that runs across the top part. Josh can maybe throw in a line or two. Yeah, right over there. Okay. And so, and that's a kind of a main passageway for the school from one part of it to another. So this is an obvious layout, looking with the windows in the background, much like Jazz at Lincoln Center. But there are other layouts. There's a layout that is to the right-hand side, which is actually north. Okay, there's a big white wall there, so there's a projection potential on that wall, although we do have a screen that drops down in front of the window. There was a circle in the round configuration, which we had to deal with both electronically and acoustically. There's an obvious, that's a sort of obvious layout looking towards the windows. And this is the first time that everybody, we could go back. Why don't we just stay on that one? You can see it was quite a journey. I don't know if we're going to have time to go through every single iteration, but from those early Celia sketches to what we ended up with, thanks to Herb and thanks to everybody, thanks to all of us just pushing each other further and further, those original ideas certainly morphed into something pretty exciting. And it really is that transparent. I mean, that's not Photoshop. That's really what it looks like. Harlem sees the performances. We see Harlem. And of course, we have blackout shades, et cetera. And we're going to discuss that when we get into the technical aspects of the room.
It's tremendously challenging as an architect to design a space that has to be multiple things without being really generic. You know, a lot of large institutions have a multi-purpose room, which is just basically a blank room. And in this case, the institution had so much character. There was so much going on inside the walls. We wanted the lobby which doubles as a performance space, to feel warm and welcoming all the time, no matter whether it was full or empty, whether there was a performance there or people simply waiting, caregivers waiting while a child is inside of a classroom.
And
So-
unlike other performance halls, this one, there's the entrance to the building. This is the main entrance to the school. So the real challenge is, how do you get everybody coming in the main entrance? We want them to know there's a performance hall there, but we have to have a sense of control. I mean, we have drop off, we have kids, there's responsibility. So this was a really cool solution, this sort of textured glass wall. Okay, so the space is divided. There's privacy, there's enough acoustic privacy, but on the other hand, everybody that comes in knows that this performance space is happening and can happen. So that was not it took a while to figure that out, and kudos to the design team. We have to take care of acoustics, theatrical lighting, and of course the audio systems, which is of course what most people want to hear about at the AES. Let's look at the acoustics first. Josh, you want to take us through some of that thinking? These are the kinds of studies that we did. So we're going to get a little bit geeky here right now.
Yeah, we modeled this room in a software called CAT. Of course, after making existing, we had the benefit working for us that we had an existing room in which we could make some measurements. And you can see that initially the reverb time is outside what we would consider the limits for this kind of space, for the programming and for the volume.
Yeah, for all the AES people, I mean, Odeon and CAT, these are the sort of NEs, I guess these are the leading predictive modeling software. We know all three. We use CAT at WSDG. That's just, we're more familiar with it. And when we have an existing space, of course, we have tremendous ability to match the two. So, you know, in the CAT model, we would make assumptions. This is a tricky space. It's a little bit complicated. Every material, why don't we go back to the graph? So we just kept changing the absorption qualities, the impedance on the materials until we got those graphs to pretty much pile up on top of each other. So that's existing versus measurement. And once we have that, now we have a baseline. And of course, as Josh said, you can quickly see we're way out of the limits that this space is supposed to be at. I mean, look at what's going on at 1,000 hertz. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah,
which
almost
anybody
2
that was in
seconds.
the space would know that the space was horrible to perform.
And they did, because particularly talking to Eric in his early days, low speech intelligibility and a muddy sound, overly reverberant, and you can see that here.
Right. So not only did we get the CAT model to equal the existing conditions, took a little bit of time, but we got it. But it also, if we go stay on that one more second, Josh, it also matched, and this is when it's kind of cool. It also matched what everybody was hearing. It's always nice when the graphs actually equal what you actually hear. It just doesn't sound good. Okay, so good news. We know where we're going. We know where we're starting from. Now the fun starts.
And it's, you know, it's not really any wonder. I mean, we had carpet really tamping down the highs, but everything else is fairly reverberant. We did have a couch doing some work, but you can see that it really takes a nosedive here in the high frequencies, but really the mids and low mids are pretty uncontrolled. Early on with Celia's team, we were looking at products like the acoustic ondular, which we go back here, ended up having a through line. I don't know if this ended up being the acoustic product, Celia. I just don't remember, but it was something like it. right? So already
Yeah.
we had an idea of where we were headed. Although in those days they were going to be curved, which was one of the ideas we were throwing around at the
It
time.
was a fun process because we started throwing ideas out, design ideas and coverage ideas. Celia and her team, quite a few people, also had ideas. And then there was a moment when we said, Celia, determine visually where you think where you want this to go. It could be flat panels that are angled. It could be flat panels that aren't angled. It could be a honeycomb solution. It could be baffles, which actually were one of the solutions we thought would be easy and also relatively economic. Celia's team eventually came up with these shapes, and then we went to work and figured out how much of them we need, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it looks pretty handsome when it's all done. It looks kind of cool.
And we'll get back to this in a minute, but this allowed us to sort of sneak infrastructure up in between these baffles, right? Architectural lighting, theatrical or production lighting, even pipes to hang. And I'm sure Fetty can talk to that.
I'm glad we went with a baffle scheme for that reason, because there was, as the project grew, it became obvious that there were a lot of other things that had to happen in this ceiling.
Just going back to that original thought, Celia, where we kind of have to be all things to all people. We have to facilitate so many different activities and programming in this room for Eric to push his programming forward. So that the flexibility of the ceiling really became key.
As beautiful as this balcony was, this is a surface that we had to make absorptive. We determined pretty quickly that there would be some really nasty reflections off this. That would really sort of wipe out everything we tried to accomplish with the glass. But Celia's team wanted this in wood. I personally think it's sensational. It tied in with the stair. And so we went to a microperf solution, which, and you have to be about a foot away to even realize that there's tiny, tiny little holes. You can't even see them. That surface is foam. Basically, acoustically, it's doing exactly the same thing as foam, except it's wood.
And the same, and the thing was that this was one of the only walls we could affect any change on acoustically. I mean, this wall needed to be blank in order to support artwork. This wall over here,
or a projection.
or what? Yeah, we got glass over here, glass over here. The other side is a stair and the reception. So I mean, you take it where you can get it, right?
And then on top of it, you had my team us saying it has to be wood, it has to be a ribbon, it has to be monolithic. It has to match the stair and the floor. And you guys were like, oh my God. Yeah, it was definitely a very important, interesting recipe of each team's needs. And I really got to give you guys kudos for having so elegantly solved, really the needs that we had made as a mandate from Herb's direction. It's got to be warm and welcoming. It has to include everyone. And so,
there's not a lot of people that can do microperf. It's getting to be more and more popular, but at the time in the New York area, really only one major manufacturer out in New Jersey, RPG, that could actually make microperf at this level and at this quality. And they did a great job, actually.
And we may want to mention that Josh and his team really did a kind of Herculean effect here, because what happened was we had an old balcony that was not to code and rather dangerous. And yet that balcony was a wonderful place for kids to be able to see a performance from above. So when we redid the balcony and had it we were redesigning the balcony, it was very important to me to have the triple bars, which are a kind of echo of the ballet. So anyone who does a dance class recognizes those 3 bars. So there's the 3 bars across, and they have to be a certain height apart. And then the opaque part of the balcony can only be a certain height. We didn't want it opaque the whole height, because then a little kid can't see through. But if you make it too low, then people are looking up skirts and dresses, and it's too exposed. We had this perfect balance that we were achieving architecturally, and then we're like, okay, John, make it work.
there's what it was, which was not doing anything actually quite negative acoustically. And then there's what it became. Okay, really stunning and beautiful. As Celia said, reflecting the 3-bar solution. And but that's our job. I mean, we all wore a few hats on this project. I mean, but ultimately, as acousticians, our job is to support the design team. Somebody has to be the image master and the taste master, and that's our job. We did push and shove each other a few times, but only a few. All right, so the results are in the RN. Okay. To remind everybody, that red line was essentially what we had. Remember the cat model and our measured basically were on top of each other. And of course, the shaded area is our upper and lower limits, our target limits. And we had 2 modes, curtains deployed and curtains undeployed. And you couldn't be more on the money. Certainly undeployed when we want an acoustic moment, strings, for instance, like the video that we saw in the beginning of this presentation, and then maybe for more of an electronic presentation, rock group, et cetera, you'd want, or a film presentation, you'd want to deaden the room and get down to the bottom limits. Not going to get too much better than this. Not really. It's about as
Really
good
amazing.
as it's about as good as we can get. Betty, I'd like to just shift a little bit into what everybody at the AES is probably most interested in, okay, which is the electroacoustic solution. Not obvious. We have multiple orientations, multiple directions. We have limits as to where we can put things. We have speakers that we may want them to be larger than our design team wants them to be, not to mention et cetera, et cetera. So why don't you take over for a few minutes? I'm glad you're here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you. I'm glad to be here as well. Well, whenever we start a project like this, or whenever we start systems design, we ask the end user what they're going to do in the location, in the place. And we said, well, we had a meeting and we said, are you doing recitals? Yes. Are you doing recording? Well, yes. Are you doing, art galleries? Yes. So everything was a yes. and that was the first challenge, right? Everything was a yes. They wanted to do everything. So I remember, Josh, we were there together.
Eric, you didn't tell us this in the beginning, that you wanted to do everything.
Everything. So we were there with Josh and we had a meeting, and I looked at this place. It was a fantastic location, fantastic. Well, we've just described it. And my mind started racing. How do we get to a system that can handle everything that we want to be doing here without compromising each one of those same programs, right? You cannot do everything like perfectly well without, balancing out some other things that you may not do that well. And so my first question was, okay, so where's your main stage? And they said, well, everywhere.
Main stages.
Right. So we want to do everything and we're going to do it everywhere. Fantastic. So, well, that, of course, boiled down to or simmered down to something that a little bit more manageable. And after some pushing, we ended up having 2 or 3 orientations that worked better. Architecturally, worked better acoustically, and well, I mean, as Josh just mentioned, there's a stairwell on one side, there's a reception on one side. So that side was kind of not usable for most things. There was a very nice glass wall, and that was very nice to look at. So people would actually want to look that way, and people would look this way. So the horizontal, actually wall to front of house direction was, more important orientation. And we had a secondary orientation on the wide wall to the north.
I think in the end, I mean, yes, we want it to be everything for everything, for every purpose. But in the end, I think it was acknowledged that from an electroacoustic point of view, there were really two main
Correct.
ways you could do this room. You could orient to the drawing south, which is actually east, or orient to the drawing right, which is really north.
Right.
You know, I
And there
mean,
was also-
you could orient any way you want, but you know, you can't have 9 systems in there
Correct.
without just making it a mess. And I think these were the two directions that we paid attention to.
Right. So basically, at the end of the day, we ended up having a main orientation, which is where the main line array is hanging, a secondary orientation, which is what is shown on the screen right now, and that was basically the idea was to have a like sort of a portable system that could portable PA system that would amplify if needed. Sometimes it's just not needed to amplify anything. And the third orientation was like, it's not an orientation rather, but something that we will use this space as a whole for a dance recital, for example, in which we will have people dancing in the middle. So, and for that, we actually had to design a secondary system. So we have 2 permanently installed PA systems. We have the main line array in the main orientation, and the secondary PA system is what's hanging on the columns and with those vertical speakers. We also have connectivity panels on the floor, not on the floor, but on the lower side of the columns. Those panels are mic panels and tie lines and basically infrastructure for connectivity in order to be able to get audio lines from the stage to the front of house position. And from there, well, you can actually use them for recording. You can use them for amplifying or maybe.
Eddie, what's the backbone? Is the backbone copper, Dante combination?
We have a combination. We always like to leave copper in place because it's just good to have actual copper when everything comes down. But more and more each day we are relying on Dante and network connectivity to be able to just share the audio signals from anywhere to anywhere.
Can you talk about the FOH position, the primary FOH position, and then maybe secondary?
Yes.
Maybe go back to that photo.
So the main front of house position is right to the left of this photograph. It's up there. The balcony was extended forward because that was, as John, you said before, it was the main throughway of the school. So we couldn't have just put a large board up there blocking the hallway or the balcony. So the balcony was extended forward, and it was room made for a four space rack, like 14 units tall. There was a picture somewhere. That is the main location for all the front of house, but not only for the audio system, but also for the lighting system. And at one point in time, there was also a video system with a video switcher that was planned that I think it was ultimately not installed. But the infrastructure to put it's still there, and you can still do that.
Can FOH positions appear in other locations?
Yes, we have, because of the Dante connectivity. Dante is just network at the end of the day. So in any location that there is a network port, we can just put in a board that will connect to that Dante. And on just about any other location, you also can have a stage box for microphones and for anything else.
Eric, I realize, all this happened in a horrible moment in time.
Yeah.
The pandemic era, which of course we could have our own talk about what we learned from it, but people are using the space. We just saw a video of people using the space.
Yes.
Other than that performance, have other people been using it, and how are they using it?
The orientation has been always where the audience is facing the glass, with the glass behind performers. That has been, I've yet to see the orientation that is on the screen is yet to happen. I believe you were one of the early ones to say that the orientation towards the glass was the best way. Yeah, we've had, the performance you showed earlier was the Harlem Chamber Players. We've had the Harlem Opera Theater. Our friends that are around the Harlem area that are particularly in the acoustic area, acoustic space, chamber musicians, Harlem Opera Theater, they've all done several things here already. They love the sound. They love the look of it, the sound of it.
Yeah.
We also have had summer camp live this summer, a Harlem Summer Arts Experience. One of the things that's been amazing with the screen there, we've done a lot of live streaming, things where, you know, where we've been able to bring parents to see final performances in the camp via live streaming with the technology. So we've been using it in that way. And then this week on September 25th, actual classes will begin back at the.
I like I like the last two photos. They kind of show us, obviously with limited seats because of pandemic, but they do show what I think are the two primary orientations.
Yeah.
Josh, can you talk about the screens? I know we had to kind of have a number of privacy screens. What did we end up with?
Yeah, and you too, Celia. We have a projection screen up front, right?
Just comes down, right?
Viewing, it comes down. But then we also have a blackout shade that can come down. I don't think we have a picture of that.
The video had the blackout screens, yeah. And it was determined early on that they were needed for a number of reasons. Some performances, I imagine, just maybe they just were not comfortable with people looking in. In some instances, I remember a conversation with you, Eric, where there would be moments where people would be rehearsing and they just don't want the people to see the rehearsals.
Right.
So we needed to have blackout screens, but these are the two major orientations. That video that we saw in the opening minute was what I would call circling around. Basically, that was just people performing for themselves, in which I imagine the space would sound fantastic with that kind of orientation. It'd be very exciting to see how the students, to see what they just gravitate to naturally without you telling them. There you go. I don't even know what do you call that orientation? In fact, what is that, Eric? What are you doing in that picture?
Well, there are times when we'll do things where, you know, we'll have, you know, meetings where we have, and like yesterday, we had our instructors here, our TAs, our teaching artists, and they would break out into small groups and just have conversations. So space is used in a multitude of ways. But that is just one of them where you might have small little pods of people together. In fact, the Harlem Chamber Players was done that way because that was all recorded and then broadcast here in one of the local stations. So
this photo really just makes me smile because all the work and the effort and the I wouldn't say arguing, but all the meetings that we had, just struggling with, you know, how to over orientations and whatnot. And when you see in a matter of minutes, 3 very, very different layouts, all working successfully, it's sort of the proof that this worked. I want to give PK a few minutes before the AES cuts us off. PK, you had to install all this stuff.
Yeah,
it's one thing to draw it, it's another thing to install it. So I want to know how smooth this was or how smooth it wasn't, and then I want you to tell me 2 things we should have done different.
Okay, well, let's see. Maybe I can share my screen.
You can, yes, absolutely. I always save that question. I always save that till the end. What should we have done differently?
So let's see if I can get to here. So our job is to obviously provision all the equipment and take this elegant design and make it a reality, like Josh was showing. So through that there's a lot of engineering and testing and compatibility to make sure all
lighting scheme. That's the lighting layout. Yep.
Yeah, to make sure all this stuff works. And of course, during the course of the project, manufacturers may change some of these items, or they become end of life, discontinued, whatever it may be, or a challenge that we faced in the pandemic is items were not available. So it's really, we overcame all those challenges. This is the video system schematic that WSDG designed. So it's our job to make that stuff a reality. So we engineer everything, come up with shop drawings, submit this to WSDG and the team, and they approved everything. And then there's things that come up what people may not realize is you have those really nice speakers, line arrays hanging from the ceiling. But how do you hang them from the ceiling? You can't just clip them up there. You have to, it takes a little bit of work to do that. So we have to go through a whole structural design. And here we have the customized clamping system devised and designed so the speakers would look exactly as intended, hanging from the ceiling. So we have the beam and the custom made.
Hey, PK, let's stay on this for a minute. This is the kind of stuff that the AES is gonna, our fellow AES members are gonna be really interested in. This is in the weeds.
Yeah, this is really in the weeds.
But it's really in the weeds, but this is really where the pedal hits the metal, or the metal. Yeah, I guess the pedal hits the metal, because like you said, it's one thing to draw it, it's one thing to spec it. But it didn't take long before everybody realized, wait a second, I'm not hanging these without some structural engineering.
Oh no, serious stuff. And there's a lot of review and back and forth going with Josh, because you need the speakers to hang perfectly underneath the lapidaries, and they have to have that look. So there was a lot of back and forth and review process going on with this. And this is
Hey, Herb, this is the kind of stuff we don't share with you. And something tells me you don't want to see this.
Well,
maybe you do want to see it.
well, I'm a little embarrassed to tell you the truth. Honestly, I didn't realize how intricate all the decisions that you had to make were made. And I like to, congratulate everyone involved in this project. And for me, it's beautiful because everyone who enters this beautiful space, they're going to feel safe, and they're going to feel special. And for me, that's the huge win. All the things that we're talking about are the things that nobody else will ever know about, but we do. And you guys pulled it off. Everyone involved pulled it off. And I want to thank you. Seriously, it's a great project, and I'm so proud to be part of it.
Yeah, PK, that
so that's a one-off solution,
yeah,
customized for the school. And there's a few more pages to that, but it's just more and more details down to every little screw, which one it's used, how it's the angle that it's hung at. And what you see is the way that the artists have intended, architectural team, acoustic team, design team.
I think in the end, I'll get back to what would we do differently. But one thing I wouldn't do differently, we had a number of different ceiling designs. This was not the first design that I would have gone with, although we have done a wave banner type design. But I think Josh would agree with me. In the end, this was a very, very smart decision, because we had there's a lot of stuff up there that you don't really see. I mean, if you look for it, you can find it, but there's a lot of pipes and wires up on that ceiling that would have been really, really difficult to deal with if we had gone with some kind of flat surface that then you'd have to put stuff above it and penetrate and whatnot.
Yeah, and there's white lighting fixtures there, and white lighting fixtures were not available, so we had to custom paint them locally. And obviously the white speakers were not available, so there was a custom solution implemented to make it look good in the space.
But what would you do different, PK? What should we have done different?
Well, I wouldn't say that the acoustics team is doing anything different, because that's not my scope. And the system was designed very elegantly, and I think everything was thought about to make it future-proof. So the network system is there. So there's really nothing that we would have changed, except for maybe we need a little more funding to get more lights up there. That would be.
Right, but the infrastructure is in for the lights, correct?
The amount of fixtures were specified were double that the school was able to afford, but this is obviously,
Right, but that's
but doing anything like design-wise, I wouldn't have changed anything because it's functional. And we didn't run into any issues, compatibility issues whatsoever.
Josh, I'm gonna throw that out to you. I didn't give you any warning. What should we have done? If we had a chance to do it over, what would we do different?
I would have had an opening party, invite everybody.
Well, okay.
I'm still waiting for that invite
With Herb
Eric.
Alpert playing.
with her playing for sure.
Yeah.
Right, Eric, we haven't had an opening party. We just haven't been able to, right?
We haven't actually. We're going to do what we're calling a homecoming on the 28th of October. So your invites are in the mail.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
And then we're hopefully going to have a real party in the spring. We're still trying to get past COVID so we can bring the people in there that, enough people in there. And we're seeing ways to do things where on-site testing and people vaccine. So we're just letting some of the anxiety go down before we really have the real blowout party.
Throw out another question to Eric. Now that the space is starting to be used, the systems, either lighting or the electroacoustic system, the audio system, is being operated by, I assume, by staff.
Yes.
How are they finding it? Are they finding it relatively easy to use? Are they running into any problems?
No, they were the team. The team of folks came in and did training with the people who work it.
Right.
The main difference is when we had this level of investment come in, we had an old system, and they didn't mention it earlier. That used to be in a little folding table down on the main floor. So having a proper booth area for the techs was major for us. And so one of the things we did, we have a professional tech that's on board. We only work with those techs. It used to be that other little system, all kind of people would be behind there on the board, but we really have limited that just because, it's important to us that this lasts as long as possible and we care for it. And the best way we feel for that to happen is to have more professionals behind the board and not just anybody. So that's been one of the changes that we did internally in terms of who can access the space. But I also just want to say real quick, John, that one of the visions for HSA was to be a cultural hub to the community, a place where people had access to training, a place where they had access to looking at performers, local performances and performers. Performers could come and do residencies here. And what you gave us is something that's attractive, that as Herb pointed out earlier at Manchester's, where I also had visited many, many years ago. Our students come in and feel special about where they are because they're in a world-class, design and laid out and acoustically world-class what has happened here. And at the same time, the top professionals in our community want to come here and be and perform in the space. So attracting that allows us to create this this holistic community where our young folks can see the older accomplished musicians or actors or dancers, and it's great for learning. It is just great for learning and cultural expression. So thank you, Herb, for having just his humanity and his generosity to fund the project, and all of you guys who were part of just making it a reality. Thank you from all of us here at Harlem School of the Arts.
Thank you. I want to end with a geeky question though, and I'm going to direct it to Fetty. Fetty, yesterday I was on a call describing a project, a pretty sophisticated project, where essentially the entire system was Dante, there, other than a few local copper routes from mics. If you had it to do again, would you go 100% copper, 100% Dante, or would you still have a hybrid design?
In this case, in this specific case, Dante is a fantastic solution. And actually, I was going to say that, for example, for the lighting, production lighting, we have DMX, we have copper.
Right.
We have done that with over IP DSP, which is a solution that it's coming up more and more. However, networks are typically managed by non-audio people, non-production people. And so they don't understand the criticalities. The IT people don't understand the criticalities of audio. Timing issues and jitter, latency, all of that is critical for audio to run right. And that is why maybe just at least a couple of copper lines will always save you the day if something breaks.
So if you had it to do all over again, you would still stay with the hybrid solution.
But it's not hybrid. It's not hybrid. It's Dante with copper backup.
With copper backup. Okay.
That's
Good.
what I would do.
I happen to agree with you. Yeah. Well, good. This is a good wrap up. Eric, thank you for those really kind words. And I haven't said it enough, but Herb, first of all, thanks for joining us early in the morning in California, and thanks for your generosity. I only hope we're able to get you back on the road, and your first New York performance will be in this room. I hope that happens someday. We'll see, right? God willing.
All right. I'm game, but thanks everyone. This was a real eye opener for me, John. I mean, I really have a serious appreciation for everything that was done. And like I said before, congratulate everyone that was involved to put it all together. I know everyone is going to feel special when they walk into this space.
Cool.
And that's the way I was hoping it would be.
Great. All right.
And I gotta say one more thing. This
Okay,
project was a real labor of love for everybody involved, right? I mean, people at every level, on the school side, on the design side, on the contracting side, on the install side, just they rolled up their sleeves, they worked together, they figured it out. They made a lot happen with a little. They stretched things in a way that on other projects that you just don't see people bending over backwards to make things happen. And it's because of people like Eric and Aubrey and Amadea and people on his staff. Just, you can see that it's really baked with a lot of love. And it shows, I think, when you get welcomed into this space. So, you know, I could talk about this all day, but that's really the most important part for me.
Yeah, and there's a lot more people behind the scenes. We could have had 30 people here, but the focus is on some of the tech, and you know, this is our mouthpiece for the day. We'll have I hope we have other opportunities for other discussions. I know Celia is working on an architectural roundtable to happen in the spring, et cetera. Anyway, Herb, thanks again. Say hello to Lonnie. Eric.
All right, John,
Everybody.
Cool, Josh, everybody, take care. Good to see
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a very good day.
Thanks.